Good afternoon. Jim Vasello back here. So we're starting the afternoon session, gets more into the use of SpinFire, functionality, collaboration. And during this, if there's any questions, again, as before, go ahead and raise the questions on site here. If you have questions, let me know. What I'd like to do is go through a couple things first before we get into more of the training side of things. So as mentioned before, with a lot of products, and there's the bug flying around here, with a lot of products, you know, maybe 20% of the product, and I find that happens also with our software. So I'd like to go through some of what I think are some of the basic functions, as well as some of the advanced functions. And as we showed some collaboration before, we can get into that. And when I mean collaboration, it could be either internal in the file, or it could be putting that information in an Office document with the SpinFire for Office install, or with just a thumbnail in many ways. So also, what I'm running now is a pre-release of version 11.6.0. 11.5.1 is the latest customer release. 11.6.0 will be coming out, I'm hoping, in a week. That could change, but I believe in any case, it should be by the end of the month. So I'll go through some of the functions there as well. So with the collaboration side, and we saw a little bit of that before. Well, what do we mean? You know, people use SpinFire in many different ways. A lot of times it's just you pull up a part, you get the volume, bounding box, and you're done. But a lot of what can be used for is downstream saving that information in the file so people can collaborate with it, whether it's in SpinFire itself, or as we saw before, with the collaboration with the Centro product as well. So one of the things with the collaboration is the user views. Now, user views have been around for ever with the SpinFire products. Version 11, they've gotten much better. So a lot of times what I'll do is create my start view. It's just going to store what I'm looking at here. That way, if I come off screen, I come back to my start view, it brings it back to where it was. Okay, and that also allows us to create views that show other information, such as I may want to show just this engine head, and I may want to change the rendering mode to add edges to it. Well, that's a new view, right? So I'll create a new view. Called engine head. Now, to me, that's something I've been doing forever. It's just second nature to user views, but a lot of people don't use those. What's been added to version 11, though, is the ability to create our own internal layers and filters, just like a CAD system has. As an example, I have this user-defined view, and I may want to create some dimensions. I'll just do a simple calculate minimum bounding box. Okay, well, now that is stored as a markup in here. So if I go back to my start view, and I go back to this view, so now I'm storing the view of the file, the view of the part I'm looking at, along with any markups. So I can use this later on to show people that bring this file up, where's my start view, where's my dimensions view, where's my explode view, where's whatever other view that I'm working with. That's part of collaboration, right? I'm telling other people where the information is and how to get to it. Okay, so as an example, I can go back to my start view, and I may want to create a 2D note, and I'll put that note up in the corner here. and I'll call this select to see dimensions. Okay, and let me do one more thing here. So what I'm going to do is create a link to that engine view where I have my dimensions. Okay, so now when I select that, there's my dimensions. Well, now I can also create another one. Select to see the start view. And again, I'll just select, in this case, my start view. So I select that to my start view. I see that, select that, there it goes to my dimension view. So I'm creating these views so you can actually show create as many views as you want, as many of these notes that you want. And the reason I put a 2D note in there is because a 2D note, like we know if we use that, it just sits there. It doesn't rotate around. But that doesn't mean I can't add another note to, let's say, a surface. And I may want to select to see the help site. Well, I can also link to help.actify.com. So now it goes right to the website directly from SpinFire. So I can link to a website. I can link to a document. I may want to link to an Excel document or a Word document. Maybe have material spec information related to this that you want to link to, so you click on it and it brings up that document. Okay, so these are all the things that, of course, we don't have the spell check in there, but that's okay. That a lot of customers don't see because it's not the 20% of what you typically use a product for, right? Because you're opening it up, you're measuring, you're getting the volume, surface area, maybe the weight, and so on. You're not seeing these other things, but these other pieces of functionality could help quite a bit for you to do your job quicker and more efficiently, and that's what we're all about here, right? That's what we're trying to do. Okay. How many people deal with assemblies both on-site and on the web, I guess, that have not used the new Explode view in SpinFire 11? Well, I guess that's a good question. I don't know the cross-section of how many people have been SpinFire users before version 11 or still use version 10. I'm not sure. But if you're dealing with assemblies, chances are you want to create an exploded view, right, at some point for some reason. Like we saw in the Centro demo, the SpinFire Web, it has that explode assembly feature that allows you to just drag that bar back and forth. People who have done that in version 10, you know it wasn't that easy. Okay, we make it very easy to do that, whether it's a spherical or a radial, just around whatever axis. That was around the x-axis. I may go around the z-axis to explode that out. Or linear. I may just want to go up along my z-axis. Okay. And then from there, just create a user view right off the bat. Exploded assembly. So now I have a new view. So there's my start view. Right now I can put another note. Fat Finger Day for exploded view. And what do? I go ahead and link to that explode view. All right, so there's my explode view. Okay. Again, this is all about collaboration. Once I save this file, somebody else can open up and easily see that, oh, well, there's my dimensions. And then I can go ahead and add more dimensions because I'm in that view. So if anybody is using a CAD system and you're used to creating your layers and features, and I think snapshots, some CAD systems call them to do this, this is our version of it. Okay. We also may want to put this information in an Office document, like I did before, into the Excel document. There's a lot of things that we can do with this. So if I go back to my exploded assembly, and again, that exploded assembly is there, but I may want to adjust it a little bit because it's, you know, things aren't really as exploded as I want, so to speak. So I can still come in here and manually, just by the transform handles, move the components to different locations, right? Just to get it a little bit more refined here. Okay, and that's good. But now I need to update this so the system stores the new position of those files. So in my user view here, right-click on the geometry, update geometry, because I moved that geometry, right? It's in a different location. So now I just stored it. So the user view stores the position, the orientation, the status, you know, what color is it? Are there edges on it? Where is it located? All that is stored, okay? So I may want to, and let me start an Excel spreadsheet here. So I may want to put this information in a spreadsheet. Does anybody pull information out of SpinFire and put it in spreadsheets now? Yeah, what's a typical way you do that? Is it just like a copy of the screen and dumping it in there, or? Okay, good. So, yeah, my screen just went bonkers with this for some reason. So the response was you can pull the bill of materials or the parts list out of the SpinFire file and put it into an Excel document. That's one of the ways I was just going to explain. So thanks for that, Rob. Well, what do we mean by that? Under the file export parts list option, you can pull the parts list out of here. Okay, there's my parts list. I may want to do it in a flat level. I may want to do it in multi-level to show the indentation of the parts and subassemblies and such. I can save that to a file, or I can just copy and drop that into Excel. So there's my parts list, but there's no image. You know, sometimes it's good to have an image there. So a couple of ways in SpinFire I can do that is Control-C will copy that screenshot. Now, Control-C wasn't always there in version 11. It was in 10. It wasn't put in version 11 at the beginning, and now it's been added back to version 11. So Control-C, a typical Windows Control-C copy, right? Why is that there? And then I can just drop that in there. And then if I want, I can just use your normal cropping feature of Excel and all that. So that's one way. The other way is like I had shown before, right? I can actually put the SpinFire document itself into this file. We have, if anybody has installed 11.5, I think it came out, trying to remember back. But anyway, or is 11.5.1, Ty? 11.5.1. So when you install SpinFire, one of the options is a checkbox to install the Office integration. That will put on your add-ins tab here in Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, this open workspace. And I can go to whatever folder my files are in, and I'll just use the same one here, and then select the file that I want to put into Excel. If you do not see that, that means it's not installed. If you've upgraded, yeah, question. Good question. The question was, what version of Office is supported? And it's version 2013 and 2016 so far, but not before that. It won't install. We had to make a cutoff at some point, and anything before that, there was too big of a change in the Office product to allow us to efficiently do that. So 2013 and 16. So good question. If the product was installed, if you have a previous version and you do a help and check for updates, and if it finds a new update, it will install that without the Office integration if you don't already have that installed. Okay, because it can't interpret that. If I have version 11.4 with no Office integration and I do an update to 11.5.1, it will not install the Office integration. You'd have to go into the control panel, programs and features, and I think if you do a repair so it goes through the installation process again, you'll get that checkbox and just check it, and it will install that plugin. But either way, it'd have to be either repaired or just reinstalled, because there's no way to interpret. There's nothing in SpinFire that will allow you to do that. It's just, it would have to be reinstalled one way or the other in order to do that, yeah. So what you get is, it looks like a SpinFire panel or the application. It really is, but it has at the bottom this insert to Excel or Word or PowerPoint, depending on how you started it up. And it will allow you to insert, give it the width and the height that you want to insert it as. And wherever the cell is active is where it will insert the SpinFire object, we call it. And all documents means that if you have 2D documents in there or other workspaces, it will put that in there as well. And then you just select the insert, and it will insert that right into Excel in this case. And it's just an image until you activate it. So I can grab this and I can stretch it out to here. Double click it, and it will activate SpinFire. So SpinFire is actually running inside of the Office document. So I can come back to this and close that out because I don't need that anymore. So now I have in Excel a working version of SpinFire. I also have this little button here that allows you to expand all the features, all the functions and toolbars and whatnot. So I can actually come in here if I wanted to and do some dimensioning. When I click outside, because I made changes, it's going to ask if you want to save those changes. Yeah. So it will now save those dimensions in that file. When I save this Excel spreadsheet, it saves that SpinFire file within Excel. So if it's a 5 meg SpinFire file, my Excel spreadsheet is now going to be 5 meg larger. It's not a link to anything. It's the SpinFire.act 3D file right within the Office document. Again, it's collaboration. I can now email this to somebody, or I can upload this to the Centro catalog part as another piece of information related to that stored in the database. Depends on where you're at, what you have installed, what you're running. But it's all about using the data again, which is what we're about, right? We keep using the data and how you want to view it. This is one way. We have the CAD file, we imported it. We got the bill of materials. Static image, and a full 3D object right within Excel. Any questions on that, internal or on the web? Nothing? Okay. Okay, I'm going to come back to this guy right here. So the dimensioning in SpinFire, you know, we've always had the drop down for the different functions, right? Now, those of you who have used version 10, you probably remember those used to be called vertices, vertex to vertex, and we all wondered why did we ever call that vertex? Because when we import it, we tessellate it, and tessellation is triangles, and at each corner triangle there is a vertice. So it was called vertex to vertex and such. Well, I never really liked that. I said, well, yeah, but for an end user, it's a point. They don't care about a vertex. It's a point. So luckily, they listened, and now everything's called points. Okay. For those of you who hadn't used version 10, it's not a big deal, but there's other people that are back there clapping, not literally, but they are. So anyway, we still have the drop downs. Now the user interface looks different, right? If you're version 10, if anybody in the audience out there is a version 10 user, maybe for a long time, when you see version 11, you may or may not like the interface because it's very Windows 10-ish, tablet-ish type interface. I personally, when I saw this many years ago, Chris will attest to that I really didn't like it. But I wasn't used to it. I can't go back to version 10 now because I'm so used to this interface. However, for those diehards out there, and we still have some, for now, and I don't know how long this will last, if you go to the options and applications section, there is and this go to meeting thing is in the way. Get out of the way here. Come on. There's this theme button right here. Modern Light is what we're looking at, but it has what we call the classic. Maybe name it outdated at some point, I don't know. But that basically is version 10 look and feel. So now if I come back to my workspace, it looks more like version 10. Okay. Could make all the difference in the world when somebody automatically or all of a sudden switches from 10 to 11. They see this new interface. Oh, what do I do? Even though it's not that different, it's the perception of it, and we've all been there before in different products. I know every time Skype changes their user interface or their layout, it really ticks me off. But it's a way to go back and use it and still be efficient with it, because you still, at the end of the day, need to get your job done. Okay, I'm going to switch back because I still like the modern look now. I like it better. So we have all the, well, step back a second. The other thing in version 10, plugins, right? Everything, there was a plugin for the draft angle analysis, for the weight calculator, and all that were plugins. SpinFire 11 is just one install, everything's there. Okay. Any of the, or some of the advanced features in this drop down here, such as tube length, minimum distance, thickness, that's all under this drop down here. Arc diameter, radius, and angles and whatnot, but I won't get into those. Why? Well, because we have these new features called Smart Edge and Smart Surface Dimension. How many people out there have been using version 11 that don't know about that? 20% of the product. And that's not uncommon. That's probably one of the first things we do in the training. Jeff, you probably saw that in the training. Hopefully Mark showed that. The Smart Edge and Smart Dimension. Well, why is it called Smart? Well, we had to think of something for it, right? So we called it Smart. No, that's not the only reason. The reason it's called that is when I go into that feature, I'll zoom in a little bit here. When I hover my cursor, I don't know if you can see that there, yeah. When I hover my cursor, it highlights the edge and it gives me what the value is. It shows that it's got a center point and its diameter. And that's fine. I can select it and I get the measurement. And I can right click and say I just want to draw the arc because it's just for that. And while I'm here, also what's new in version 11 is, and this goes back to customers saying that I want to see the diameter, I don't care about the center point. Can I get rid of it? No. In version 10, version 11, yeah, very easy. I just right click and say hide arc center point coordinates. Now I just see the diameter or the radius. Very easy to do because that's all I want. I don't want the center points in this particular case. I don't care about it. But back to the Smart Edge. So if I hover my cursor again, but I right click this time, look at all the options that come up. Because it's an arc, the system is smart enough to identify it as that and give me the options I can use to create dimensions. Do I want the arc length, edge to point, minimum distance between edges? Well, it's up to you. But the point is that I don't have to go up to the drop-down panel and select that here anymore. It's right here. Right-click, arc diameter, radius, arc center to arc center. Maybe the distance between that and this guy, I don't know. And on edges or straight edges, right-click. Another thing, when I'm doing edge dimensioning, in version 10, what was an edge? It was straight. If I did edge length, it was straight. I couldn't get the edge length easily from a curved edge. Version 11 doesn't matter. An edge is an edge is an edge. If I want to get the length, I'll get the length. It doesn't matter the shape of it. So in this case, I get an edge length. Or I may want to find out the minimum distance between edges. And again, I'm not going back up into my functions drop down because I don't have to. I can get the dimensions I want much quicker, much easier now with the smart dimensioning tools. Any questions on that yet? You're going to go back and use it, aren't you? I can tell. I can see the faces out there. I didn't know you could do that. Don't worry, because every time a new version comes out, Chris and I are sitting there saying, I didn't know you could do that. Not Ty, he knows it all. Smart surface dimensioning. Well, the same kind of thing. I'm dealing with surfaces in this case. So I may want to come in here, and let me come to the back here a little bit. I'm going to hide a couple of these guys. I don't need all those there. There's my surface. All I have to do is hover my cursor. It highlights the surface I'm dealing with and gives me that's 90 degrees based on my z-axis, which is the default that's selected. So I know that's 90. I don't have to put a dimension there if I don't want to because I know it's 90. Maybe that's all I needed to know. I don't know. If I move it over here, I see, oh, okay, well, that's 11 degrees. Just by moving my cursor around, I know that there's 11-degree cut through these cylinders. Whether I need to put a dimension there or not, that's your choice. Or I can right-click and say, I want to do something else with those surfaces. Maybe what's the minimum distance between that surface and the one below it? Smart Edge, Smart Surface Dimensioning. Okay, it makes it a lot easier to get the information that you're looking for if you're doing the dimensioning in this case. Lost my train of thought. What was I going to do? Come on, you're supposed to be paying attention. Oh, part scale. Scaling a part, up or down, maybe for shrinkage or whatever. That's been added back from a long time ago. So you could just key in, I want this to increase to 1.1, and I can do a preview of that. And if I like it, I'll apply it. If not, I just leave it. So the scale function is back. Okay, so where were we? Some new features. Here's a pretty cool one. I'm going to show just this part here. And we can see how it has some internals. Let me turn off my notes here. Let's say we have a part like this, and I want to know the internal volume. I'm filling it with grease, epoxy, whatever. I want to know the internal volume. Well, typically, you're going to run down to the CAD station, right? Because there's no way you're going to get that. I don't know, how would I get it? Until now. Okay. Boundary volume by surfaces. Has anybody used that? Okay. That's normal. That's, again, it's the 20%. I've never used it before. I don't know what's there. No big deal. Is there anybody who would need to be able to get the internal volume of something to find out how much material I need to fill it? Well, maybe, maybe not. I've had both. Let's say I do need to. So two-step process. One is I basically pick the seed or internal surface, one or two. That's all you need. Then when I select the blocking surfaces, what happens is the system will show that blue line escaping out the end. Well, it's my reason to block that. I mean, you want to make it look as a really cheap game, but I need to block that air from coming out, or that blue line. That's all that's doing. So I can see that it's coming out somewhere else. A lot of times you know where it's coming out. You don't have to look for it. I know it's going to come out the bottom. I know it's going to come out the top. And there's that blue line. So I'm just blocking the surfaces. Okay? And get that one. When you pick the last one that blocks it, you see the color changes, kind of like a purple translucent. That means you've blocked it, and I can go ahead and calculate. Now I have an internal volume right here. If I add a transparency to it, I can see that internal volume. Now this wasn't a very complex part. It could be simpler. It gets very, very complex that it will work on. So if that is of importance to you to be able to do that, that is under these advanced functions here, boundary volume by surfaces. And I believe this is a video up on YouTube also to show how to use this. If you go to YouTube and then search for Actify, you'll see a lot of videos there. One of the other things you might notice is on the assembly tree now, there is some items here that are in red. Well, SpinFire will now, when it opens an assembly, if there's missing parts, it will tell you there's missing parts. They're red. The other option is, while I'm on that subject, under the importers, and I'll look at all options here at the top. Check for missing parts. So the all options, basically, these are all the options that can be applied to all the importers. at one swoop, so you don't have to go in individually. Attributes for one. I always use the attributes because that deals with the PMI data or DCLS log file information that's buried in the CAD file. So now if I go to open that file again, because I know there's things missing, it's going to start checking for missing components. It should. I did check it, didn't I? Oh, I don't know why, because I opened up the SpinFire file. There it is. So you're going to see a message here checking for parts or missing parts. I hope. There we go, checking for missing parts. So right here, if you ever get an assembly from a customer and you're like, it doesn't look complete, don't have to email me. There's something missing. Turn on check for missing components, because that happens a lot. It's not showing stuff. Well, that's the top assembly file. You need the part files. Very easy to check. Check for missing parts. It will go through, check that top level assembly that has pointers to all those files, and let you know right here that, hey, these files are missing. You can copy that, paste it in an email, send it to your customer and say, hey, you didn't send me all the files. Please resend, rezip, whatever. Right there, you saved a lot of time by not having to contact anybody else to see if you have all the components. Because I've seen it many, many, many times. Why doesn't SpinFire open all the files? I go to here, I open it up, check for missing components, copy, paste in an email, these files are missing. You can do it yourself. Okay, could save you a lot of time. And you can either continue or abort loading. I'll just abort because I have this one open. You may have also seen this little guy hovering around here. That is under options. Oops. Shortcut toolbar. If you have certain functions that you use all the time, you can define that shortcut toolbar and define it to load every time you open a file, and just pick the functions that you want to pick. Okay, and you just select the ones that you want. Maybe you want to do weight and volume. Okay. So the next time you open a file, it will be applied to this, and then you can expand that out if you need to. And this just kind of hovers around here. You can put it where you want. If you don't want it there, you just don't use it. I use the Smart Edge or the Smart Dimensioning tool so much I don't come into here too often. But it's there. Okay. Okay. Sectioning. A lot of people use section cuts. Pretty much everybody uses section cuts. In the past, it's been how many section cuts? One. That's all you could use. So if I turn my section plane on, it's going to be the default section plane through my default axis here. Right? And that's my YZ section. And it works the same as before. I can move that in and out. But what's different in version 11, if you haven't tried this already, is the fact that now I can dimension right within my section cut, whereas before I could not. So I can come in, get my section, I do a minimum distance between that edge and this edge, right within my section cut. Before it was basically point to point. Okay, now you can dimension whatever edge is in there, you can dimension it in the section cut. I can also export that profile to a DXF file. All those edges can be exported to a DXF file now, and that can be used for other systems to dimension whatever you want to do with it, create a print. Or I can create an internal 2D document, which basically creates a DXF file and then puts it in a secondary workspace right within SpinFire. So here is my 3D workspace, and here's the second workspace it just created. There's a profile of that section cut. That's what the DXF file would look like if I had exported to DXF. So if you ever have anybody asking you, can I get a DXF file from your section cut? Yes, I can, and that's exactly how you do it. So you right-click on the section plane, and here are my options. Create 2D document or export. Or I can calculate the area, perimeter, or centroid, or all. So now I know the area, the centroid, and the length of all the section profiles. Okay. And that's a markup. So if I turn off this and I get rid of my assembly, it's there as a markup. Okay, and I'll go ahead and hide that. And question?
Question was, one of the clients, if you have a 2D embedded drawing from the CAD system, exporting that 2D drawing to PDF, is there a way of doing that?
Yeah, so the question was, how do I get a 2D PDF out of whatever I have open in SpinFire?
It's a 2D drawing that's in SpinFire. So let's say you've got NX, and NX came with a 3D and a 2D drawing. Can you take that 2D drawing that came from NX and export it?
Yeah, so if a 2D drawing, whether it's NX or CATIA or whatever, as long as the 2D drawing is in SpinFire, I can go to the file, export, hard copy, and that's a 2D PDF file.
When we do export hard copy, a lot of times it'll either cut it off at the ends or it'll come out incredibly blurry. So it'll print, I guess, well when you zoom all the way out, but we gotta look at all the fine details of the drawing, and it would be incredibly blurry when you try to
What version are you running? So it's the resolution is not?
yeah, resolution.
Okay. Have you tried increasing the resolution?
Looks like a screen now.
Yeah, the resolution's here, so you may go to 200 or 300 to see if that's better. Because it depends on the size of the file, right? Because if it's a huge drawing or a small drawing or whatever, you may get the vectorization, you may get the yeah, that's the first thing I would try as a resolution on that, yeah. Yeah. So the question was, sometimes when they export a hard copy to get a 2D PDF, depending on the size or type of the file, opening the PDF and zooming in, it was getting blurry. So one of the things to try in that case would be the resolution, just increase that to 300 maybe. That way you get higher resolution and you may not get that blurriness. It's the first thing I would try. Okay. One of the other things while we're on that is in version 11.6, there is additional printing features. If I go to print preview, okay, we have a lot more features here than we did before. Image setup, camera setup, where do I want to place that part in the you'll see that it was shifted over to the right. I may not want as the margins. A lot of times the margins were too large when that was printed out, so I can change the margins. If I go to normal, you'll see that the margins on the side will increase. And that was part of the one of the issues. People were saying, well, I have all this extra space, it's not being printed on. So in 11.6, you have the ability to use basically just like in Windows Office, right, Microsoft Office, right? I can change the boundary on that. So you can go to narrow, wide, custom, and that will give you a lot more printing area on the sheet of paper. However, we don't use paper anymore, right? It's all 3D. So we don't need to worry about this. I think I heard that first in 1980. So anyway, so the printing, on the print preview page, there's a lot more options than there used to be, even when version 11.5.1. 11.6, there's a lot more options. Okay. Okay. So one other thing that I just learned about in your importer settings. Now, step back a second. For those of you who have been using SpinFire for a long time, maybe from version 8, version 9 timeframe, SpinFire 11 will not open those files without first being converted to version 10. So we've added a feature in the importer setting for the .3D file to point to the SpinFire executable. So when you open a .3D file, it will do the conversion on the fly in the background and then open it up in SpinFire. That's a one-off. If there's a lot of files that you need to convert, we have other means of doing that, but if it's a one-off thing, you just need to open a really old file because, you know, we've been here 20 years in existence, so there's a lot of customers, a lot of old files out there. If you come across where you can't open a .3D file, this importer setting for SpinFire executable path, you just point it to where SpinFire 10 is installed and point it to the SpinFire executable. And it will use that in the background to convert that file. Okay. Back to sectioning. We saw a single section cut, and you've been seeing that for a long time. However, and I'm just going to enable that one again, there's also a drop down here in the section plane for define. I don't know if anybody's seen that. So that will bring up another panel and give me a lot of options here. I may want to turn off the section planes. I may want to add a second section plane and a third section plane. So now I have 3 section planes, and I may want to activate one of them, and I may want to bring it up. So now I have a 3-section cut through there. Well, I may want to flip that, see the other side of it. So I have the option of turning the profile faces on and off, maybe changing the color of my profile face. Right? Because there's time you may want to get a section like that and do a screen dump and put it in the document. Okay? 3 section planes. Show the cut material or not, edges or not, all this in that define option right here. Okay. Model compare. Let me do that, and then I think I'll open it up to other specific questions while I think about what else to show. I'm assuming people use model compare out there, or if they know about model compare. So I'm just going to bring up a couple files here. Yeah, I'll do this. So let me bring up this first file, and also notice that I still have these other files open. Multiple sessions across the top here, multiple workspaces in a session. These are all individual. They can be opened, worked on, and saved individually. So I don't have to wait for a large file that I may be bringing in. I can still work on the other one. And then I'll bring in a Rev A. Well, how do I bring one file in on top of the other file? And I'm using the library function, which that's an assumption in and of itself because that's part of the outside the 20% that a lot of people use. So I'll step back for that. If I have a file open and I want to bring one into it, there's a couple ways. For me, I use a library function, which just kind of maps the Windows folders into SpinFire. And then I can just very easily right-click and import. Okay, so that will bring in one file right on top of the other. Model compare, right under this drop-down here, along with draft angle analysis, wall thickness, curvature, and the rule-based coloring, which I showed earlier today during the other demo. Model compare. In this case, I pick one of the files. And then I pick the second file. As you pick it, it hides them so you don't accidentally pick it again. And then you do a compare sets. And it will go out and compare the added and removed between the two files that you pick. And it will show it color-coded. Added is in red, added between the first and second picked. But I can also go ahead with a slider bar up here and show more of the added, hiding the rest of it. Or I can go to the removed and then hiding. Or I can unhide the unchanged surfaces. So now I can pretty much see that this thing has a corner that was put all the way around the outside and a couple holes that were put in there. That was in version 10, not to this extent. This is much easier to use in version 10, a lot better results. Any questions on that? You want to go through that again, or are we good on that? Pretty straightforward? Okay. Draft angle analysis. And I'll just use the defaults here because I'm not sure what I'm going to get. By default, it uses a global coordinate system, positive Z, and a draft angle of 2 degrees plus or minus 0.2. And I'll just use that as a default, see what I get. Okay, not a lot. Anything in orange is above the upper limit of my draft. Anything in gray is below it. So I may want to come in here as an example and say, well, I want to go in from -1 to 3 degrees. And then analyze that. Oh, better results. I may also want to go to gradient to see if there's kind of anything in between those. Well, I can see there's a lot of pink or purple. It's kind of in the 0 mode there. Actually, let me use this guy here. For anybody who is wondering what this Rubik's Cube up in the corner is, it's the navigation cube that allows you to kind of grab the corners of that or select the corners or select the faces, rotate it 90 every time you select it. Or I can hit the F6 key, which toggles through all my standard views. So I can see that I have draft in here based on the color codes in here. And if I want, I can create a user view of that. Well, now I can go in and, I don't know, maybe do some smart surface dimensioning to get a reality check to see what those actually are. 1 degree, 0 degree, 2.5 degree. So it's a combination of the draft angle analysis and my normal surface dimensioning tools. We also have the settings tab or the settings feature right within the session that I'm working on. So I may want to, for some dimensions, change my markup line color from black to red. So now when I go to my Smart Edge dimensioning feature, my leader lines are in red. Because some customers or some companies use that as an identifier of a potential problem. It's a bad dimension, it's in red. No, who knows? So that's all up in this settings right here. These are all the different colors you can apply.
Well, the point there is that's for the current session. You want it to be for all sessions.
You do listen to me. So the comment from Ty Myers, our sales director here, basically states that is just for this session. If I come into one of my other sessions open here, and that was a very good point there, that does not take effect. It's just for that session. If I want to do it for all sessions, or anytime I open a file, I would have to come back to my options, settings, 3D viewer, and then change that here. Okay. So there's a lot of settings in here. My weight settings, which I didn't even show, define materials. This is where you can define your weight materials. If you don't like them, you can get rid of them and then import an Excel spreadsheet to populate that information. Or you can add your own right at the bottom. Okay, so now I have my own material in there. What time have we got here? Okay, cool. Okay, anybody deal with piping and need to get center line of piping? Pipe bends, radius, any of that stuff? Yeah? Okay. Tube length, exactly. So let me open up a tube that I just happen to have available here. Come on. Okay. Not a real complex one, but I'm going to add some edges to this so I kind of see what's going on here. All right, I'm going to do a show only on that. So I want to get the center line of this. I want to get the length, and I want to get all the bend points. Easy, right? So the default option under these advanced is tube length. And we have the auto-complete feature, which means it will chain along the tube as long as it can. So I can pick one end, pick the other end, and it will chain the center line all through there. Double click on the end. Did I get it? I didn't get it. to get that length. So that was pretty quick. But I need more information. So if I right-click on that, there's my arc center points, which are currently hidden. I may want the axis points, and I may want the intersection points. I also may want to export that information. So if I export that to an Excel spreadsheet, do a print preview on that. I now have all that information on my bend points, and let me go to landscape. Okay. And this can be used for the bending machine if need be to create that part. Okay. Okay, so part properties, kind of completely changing subjects here while my mind's on it. Anybody who uses NX or deals with NX files, they know there's, yeah, I know that one. You know, there's a lot of times a report that gets output called the DCLS log file. It has all the internal attributes that were assigned to this part when it was designed. That information can now be had in SpinFire by the properties that I'm showing you here on the screen, or with the central product that extracts all that information and could be made available, like we had shown this morning, in the part view, whether it's in this SpinFire web or in model compare or the comparison of those files. It's already in there. It pulls that out and automatically populates a database. Well, that information is here as well. I don't think there's a whole lot in here. Okay, so that information is all here. That's a decent amount. Okay, question was, where was that again? So basically, if you can right-click on the part and go to Properties. Yep. And depending on where you pick in the tree will determine what's displayed, because each part in an assembly will have its own piece of information. If I want it all, I just go up the tree to the higher level of the assembly. Okay, so you can just pick up and down the tree as this is open. And there was a question online. Okay, so the question is, I've tried to measure sealer with sum of connected edges, but I've had to repeat it several times to get the whole length. How can I put that just in one step? All right, let's see if I have an example here. So the sum of connected edges, let's see if this will work. Has anybody used that out there? Because that's been there for a while. Sum of connected edges basically allows you to pick edges to get the sum. Okay, so as I pick along these edges, obviously you can go in multiple directions depending on where they're contacting you. So if there are multiple directions that the chaining feature can go in, it's going to stop. And if those edges don't actually connect for some reason. Could be the CAD file, the way it was imported. If there's certain tolerances, then it won't even let you select and highlight that. So it could stop at that point where you're trying to select. Yes.
So I use this all the time for a majority of my work with some wedges. And the issue that I see, I think that the question might be on, is there becomes a point where you can still connect to that edge. You just have to zoom in an immense amount. It's like a little tiny map.
Okay.
You have to zoom all the way back up. You might get some bigger ones. But I think they're wondering if there's a way to eliminate that small.
Good point. Yeah. So yeah, and if they're not continuous, if the file that was imported, depending on what it is, tolerances build up even within the CAD file. You go from CATIA to STEP to NX, you have these tolerances that get built up, and it could be that there's a slight gap between those two edges that the software is not going to chain across. Yeah, but the algorithm underneath it that does the auto chaining doesn't know that. So it will just stop and say, what do you want to do? It's possible, and try this. Let's see, it won't work on this one. Let me try this one. Yeah, so there are times that, let me get to my, when you import a file, you're importing the tessellation and possibly the BREP, the boundary rep math data behind it, depending on the file. And in the importer settings, there are options to increase the tessellation level, which will could potentially affect that to give you better results. But sometimes it's a pain to do that because then you got to reopen the file. In version 11, again, depending on the file and how it was imported and everything, you could possibly right-click and do a retessellate on the fly. Right? So if I change the tessellation of that down to low, I don't know if it's going to do anything here. I may get jagged edges here. Kind of hard to see. However, if I change that to extra high, see how it's smoothed out a little bit? It was kind of hard to tell. Right around here, you could see that it's nice, smooth curvature. If I change that to extra low and apply it, it just looks more like edges. Okay, so you can try that. That might solve that problem. Right-click. If you see retessellate there, that means you can. If you don't, that means you can't for some reason. Depends on the file. If it was a native, if it's an IGES file or a STEP or something. Not all the files have the appropriate BREP information in it to be able to do that. That's what I'm thinking. That's probably the first thing I would try. Yeah, on thin-walled things, on thin-walled parts, you could potentially, if you do a section cut across that, you may get the varied thickness where it shouldn't be because of that. That's probably the first thing I would try is retessellate that, yeah. And if not, then send me an email and let me know. Other questions?
You repeated it.
The question was, and this came from before on, and I don't have an example, but it could be related to the tessellation on some thin-walled parts, you know, body parts or fenders or something, that doing a section cut across and finding the distance between the sections where it should be continuous, a continuous value, getting different values. Could be plus or minus something small, but it could be. It's possible it's just the tessellation because of the extreme curvature of that when you do a section cut, because it was brought in standard tessellation. You just may need to increase that. Just like a CAD system has its own tolerance, we do as well. 99% of the cases it's fine, but every once in a while you'll find that type of thin wall example that you may need to increase that. Yeah, I've seen it fix that problem in cases. So first thing I would try. Let's see. I'm gonna do this. So something really mundane here. How many people use the library function? That's good. That's more than usual. So we had one hand. Okay. So how do we typically open files? And I'm gonna close these guys. How do we normally open files? Well, I may get it in an email and double click on it. That's one way. I may navigate to the folder and double click on it. And that will open SpinFire. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And on that subject, if you double click on a file and you get an error message that Windows doesn't know how to open it, that typically means on your importers you don't have the associate button checked for that file. Just like a .doc file needs to be associated to Word in order for Windows to know what to do with it while you double click. Same with your CAD file. If you double click on it and it doesn't know that you want to open it up with SpinFire, it's going to say, we don't know what to do with this file. Options, importers, associate. If I want, I can check them all at once. Question?
So you have like bias to this. Is SpinFire the best application to open all of these files?
Absolutely.
Even PDFs in competition with Adobe, things like that.
We don't have competition. No, I'm kidding. So the question is SpinFire the best to open all these kind of files? Well, if you need to modify geometry, no, because we don't. If you need to edit and modify geometry, we don't do that. We don't want to. That's not our business. So absolutely not. SpinFire is the wrong thing to do. If you want to open up CAD files and do your own view, measure, markup, collaborate type thing, then I would probably say yes. I mean, there's other systems out there that do stuff. But Chris has mentioned this before. We had a customer that went out and evaluated 52 different viewers. Nobody in Actify knew there were 52 different viewers out there because it was global. They picked us amongst all of those because of the various things. For what they wanted to do, that was the best solution. There's others out there, and I don't badmouth other solutions. They all do their own thing. But for view, measure, markup, collaboration, the ability to use node lock and floating license, the advancing into the enterprise side with Centro in a global enterprise environment, I don't think anybody does that. So it depends on what you're trying to do. Okay, the account I was referring to was CERN, the Hydro Collider. Yeah, is it Switzerland? The thing that makes black holes that people are all scared of. Yeah, and they actually are using a portion of Centro built into their environment because they didn't necessarily want to use our browser interface, so they just use our tools and built it into theirs, and they use that whole scenario. So for them, that was the best solution. Question in the audience?
Yes, I have a question regarding the sum of collected edges.
Sum of collected edges.
Function very often, but sometimes I made a mistake in one of the steps, and I want to revert the last step. How can I do that?
Yeah, there's no, for the sum of collected edges, there's no stepping back.
That's really helpful for me because I have to
Yeah.
select, for example, the profile for a part to make a basically. But if I make a mistake in the last step, I have to redo everything.
Right. Yes, you do, unfortunately. We do have an undo feature, but because the selection hasn't been completed, it's not stored in the undo. So there's no, yeah.
Requests like this, storm of development, that'd be a fancy
The question was on the sum of connected edges. I'll do that in a second here. So one of the ways to open files, right, is just to drag and drop, double click, and so I can just, and you'll notice because I have the CATIA format associated with SpinFire, I see the SpinFire icon. That's why it's blue like that. The PDF I don't. XLS, of course, I don't. So I'll just drag and drop right over into here. So that's another way. So file, open workspace. The library function, basically it just maps your Windows folder structure so you don't have to file, open, browse. You don't have to browse to somewhere to find the file to double click or to drag it in. It's a way to mimic Windows Explorer right within SpinFire. So I have these folders here, and I can go ahead and remove the connection because that's all it is. It's a connection. If you go to library function, you'll see samples there. That's there by default. Well, that's just a link. If I look at it, if I go to Explore, it's just a link to where those files get installed when SpinFire is installed. It's just a link to it. It's a shortcut path. So I can add a connection or a path to another location. So I'm just browsing for a folder. There's that folder. Select what do I want to show in that folder, or do I want to rename it? I'm just renaming the connection, not the folder itself. And I want to show everything, not just CAD files. So now over here, I have that connection. That also allows me down in the bottom here to do a search. I may want to search at the, I don't know if you can see at the very lower left corner there's a search. And I may want to search for Actify. And it will go out there and search the folder structure until, or if it finds anything, and it will list those things, and then I can map those to a drive. I'll just stop that here. But what I can also do is, with this, I may want to come to a folder here that I want to use a file search over on the right-hand side just to look for CAT products or CAT part. So if you have a folder structure and you're just looking for certain things, you can use a library function to search for folders, map that folder as a drive, as a connection, then in that folder do a search for extensions. Okay, so there's a lot of functionality in there as well. Okay, let's. Good point, Chris. Thank you. So one of what was just mentioned is with a single license, you don't need a specific language license. Once SpinFire is installed on the settings page, application, there is a language button here. So you can select any one of these languages. And it will change accordingly. I just don't know how to get back to it, that's all. Okay, apply, I know where they're at. There we go. Okay. More questions? Anything more specific? I know there were a couple things on there. Oh, it was back to the sum of connected edges. Okay, so some are connected edges, and I'll use it on this one as an example. So if I select this one right here, let's say if I select an arc on a plane, it will go around, and sometimes it would auto change, sometimes it won't, but it will finish here. But as I'm going across, the question was, how do I, if I misselect, how do I go back? Right, there is no undo. We do have an undo selection here, but it's not going to pick that up because it's not a completed function, completed markup. I know exactly what you're talking about. I understand the issue, and it might even be in our database already for enhancements. I'm not sure. I'd have to check on that. Okay. Also, if you haven't seen, there's a whole undo section up here. Okay, so there's all the undo. I can undo under up to markups here. I can undo up to, I think, 100, depending on how you select it. So if I move over here, then I can do a quick undo. Okay. Other questions? Were there any on? I know there were more specific ones. Did I answer everyone that was out here? I'll take that as a yes. The question is, yeah, so the question was, sometimes the model will rotate slow, kind of react slow, maybe section cuts. There's a lot of variables. One is the size of the file that you're dealing with. The other is the configuration of your PC. This is a pretty powerful PC. Opening large files takes memory and CPU just to open them. Once they're open, it takes the graphics card power to display properly. So you may have 64 gig of RAM and a Xeon processor, but you have an onboard really low-end graphics card. It's going to open fast. It's not going to move around fast because the graphics card was not meant for 3D graphics. Could be that. I don't know without looking in that environment, but that certainly could be the issue. The other issue is sometimes if the graphics card is maybe a bit older and it may be crashing a little bit, you move it around and do something, poof, it crashes. Under the settings in 3D Viewer, there's a rendering section here, graphics driver, and by default it's on auto, and it'll pick the latest version of the software that gets installed with graphics cards and such and Windows. But you may want to step that back maybe to DirectX 9 or OpenGL 2. That for one could prevent any of those crashes because of maybe an underconfigured card or old graphics, out-of-date graphics drivers. Those should typically be up to date. I mean, I've seen them where they're 5-6 years old. The technology here is new. It requires newer software sometimes. But probably the first thing I do is check your graphics drivers, the dates on them, and to come under this rendering section and just drop it down one at a time and apply it, close and restart. See if that helps. Yeah, that would be the first few things I would think of.
We have to change that from the default auto setting on about half of our computers because of the age of our.
Do you? Yeah. What have you been setting it to?
Actually, I just throw back to OpenGL.
Okay.
I don't have to try all 4 different
Okay. Yeah, and again, sometimes that's fine.
And some computers I have to set it on DirectX 9 because OpenGL doesn't.
Yeah, and there's I mean the variety of computers, graphics cards, graphics drivers, the associated CPU, the memory. There's so many variables. There is absolutely no way to test them all. It's impossible. So we try to give the options there for the graphics driver. Typical things: make sure your graphics drivers are up to date. The type of card you have. If you have an onboard card, with shared memory, and you only have 4 gig of memory, and you're trying to open a 500 meg assembly, yeah, it's not going to be very good, if at all. It's just underconfigured for that. But there's so many variables there. It's really, there's no set answer on that. There's only the things that you can try, and those are some of the things that we typically recommend when there's a graphics issue. Well, it was just mentioned that on the screen here under Save Act 3D, there's a couple options here, include BREP. That's the boundary rep information that comes in with the CAD file. If you want to continue using that when you save SpinFire, select this option there. That way that math data behind the scenes gets stored with the SpinFire file as well. Tessellation compression. It adds some compression to the file to make it smaller, but sometimes it can affect the dimensioning thereafter. All right, so I guess we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate everybody's attention. I know it's been a long day. For those of you who stuck out the whole time, thank you very much. The ones who maybe joined for the afternoon session, again, thank you. I hope you found it very useful. We do have a help site. If I were to come back into SpinFire and hit the F1 key, and there's a bug right in front of me, got them. Goes to the help.actify.com. We also have training videos. We have those on, you can get to them from here as well as on YouTube if you search for Actify. There's training videos, little snippets of different functionality on there as well. Okay, well, thank you then. Appreciate it.